then we move to agenda item 14, where I think the Assembly had something to say. We've already had a question about it earlier. Ah, sorry. We've got a public speaker, but I think 29. Sorry, Lucy Price. Wow, that's stamina. Thank you for waiting, Lucy. I'm sure that some of the other material was of great interest to you as well. Okay, so thank you, Lucy. I did look at that question earlier on, saying I hadn't got it anywhere on my list. So, your question.
Thank you. I'm Lucy Price. I'm a Milton Road resident and a local photographer. I attended the Assembly last week and heard the Assembly urging an improvement to the current design code. I'd like the board to consider the use of more creative infrastructure to encourage people to walk and cycle through these spaces. Examples of this are the D&A cycle path, building on Station Road with changing lighting by Let Leon, and the cycle counter on Parker's Piece. At the Assembly, there is a call to mark the heritage of the city. The infrastructure design on Milton Road should at least reflect the groundbreaking innovative work going on in the Science Park. We should have a wow factor entrance to Cambridge. Low-level lighting, safely positioned sculpture or cycle counters could really enhance the space as long as nearby residents are not disturbed, and more importantly, encourage people out of their cars and improve the experience for all. While safety and usability is clearly a far higher priority, I would like to ask if the board will consider recommending that these spaces become a fun, interactive space where possible, and where we are likely to lose trees, we incorporate light, sculpture and creativity to compensate. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Yes, that's in the spirit of Cambridge. So we're going to, I think if we take that as part of the introduction to the report that we've got on this. So we've got recommendations, but the Assembly's got a different set of proposals. Right?
Yeah, the Assembly went into one on this one,
yeah,
which is pleasing. The Assembly, it didn't endorse the recommendations as a package. It was concerned with the lack of detail in the document, but it did state that it's a good starting point. It was commented there was insufficient references to heritage, as we just heard, vision and quality, and it was not aspirational enough. Basically, we have a design board or process for housing, so why shouldn't we have one for highways too? So the Assembly had a bit of discussion. It wasn't enormous, but we were in one frame of mind by the look of it, and there were some amendments put forward that were unanimously agreed. And the Assembly recommends, as far as the recommendations in front of you, that recommendation A be changed to, at the start, request the improvement of. So it reads, request the improvement of City Deal Urban Environmental Design Guidance document. Recommendations B and C to remain the same, but the Assembly would like to add, with the Board's permission, recommendations D and E. Recommendation D is to request officers to investigate the process of all future City Deal schemes being considered by the Cambridgeshire Quality Design Panel. So that's an investigation to see if we can actually do that. And E is it requests officers to investigate the introduction of a facility that invites members of the public to provide photographs of aspirational ideas and also ideas to be avoided for website-based montage. So we've got some interaction there as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I think we'll move to the introduction of the report. And any contributions from others? Did I see?
If I just quickly introduce it.
Thanks,
Chair.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's just that if we wind the clock back a little bit, the idea is that here we are producing a concept design document, which is a document that relates to current thinking, good practice, what's the current design guide existing out there that we can adopt. We use the expertise that we have available to us, and Glenn is here to talk quickly about it, and the consultants, WSP, Parsons Brinckerhoff, who are one of the main players in sort of urban design, public realm documentation, and producing some of the good guidance that exists out there at the moment. So the principles is that we intended to capture as much as we could in relation to what is existing good practice out there, and that's in essence what this document represents. I don't know if Glenn wants to add.
No, not very much at all, Chair, members of the board. Really just to say that when we were with you in January earlier this year, it was emphasised very strongly that these would be guiding principles, and that it was highlighting principles rather than a detailed document. As far as the recommendations from the Assembly, the quality panel, but also reference to other documents, very happy to consider those, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Okay. Any comments? Councillor Bowden?
I think I'm a bit torn really, because I hear what the Assembly says, and on the one hand I want to respect that if they want this looked at. On the other hand, a guide is just a guide, and I think it's good that it remains a guide, and also a guide on a certain extent. This is sort of a top-down process. We improve it as a guide, and the danger is you start imposing it on people. We heard throughout the whole of today lots of residents wanting the local liaison forums to get going. And I think that's a much more interesting way of finding out what people on the ground near to our schemes actually want to do locally. And in fact, I prefer in a way to be guided by them than to be guided, which I think is a bottom-up process, than to be guided from a top-down process. So I'd be happy to leave it alone, but if others want to respect the Assembly and take the amendments, I'll go along with that.
Mr. Reid?
Thank you. I suggest that we've got the Assembly, we've got the function, this is a unanimous Assembly proposition, because it's not exclusive. Both can be done.
Thank you, that was very brief. I think there's quite a lot that isn't in this document. I mean, if you look at issues like use of trees in roadscape, if you look at green spaces, I just think we've got a number of good elements in it, but I just think we should almost just consult the Assembly and the board and say, well, what isn't in there that we think needs to be added? So, Councillor Bates.
In response to Councillor Hickford, I think I'm quite happy going on with the change to number A. Okay. In respect of the other suggestions about the Cambridge Quality Panel, I should perhaps remind myself as well that I was part of the Horizons Board would set this up. Okay, it does cost money, but it tends to look at major schemes. It normally doesn't drill down greatly into perhaps the sort of schemes that are coming at Milton Road and Christopher. That's not to say we can't use them at some point in the future, but they tend to look at large schemes in respect of development, not only about the landscape, but also about the design features within the buildings, and etc. And of course they are a group of professional planners, architects, etc. And they do bring a lot when you're looking at 500 homes. And that tends to be where they tend to look at. They do look at schools as well, about how that would fit in with that. So I'm a little bit, I suspect, similar to Francis, so I can go one way or the other. I don't think I want to make a great big issue of it.
Well, I'd like to support the Assembly's recommendations. I think there is room for some interesting ideas, and I would think that as part of discussions like Milton Road that there will be occasional proposals. If we may have, depending on how things develop, an area of, I don't know, 1 metre by 10 metres or 100 metres, and we might think, well, how are we really going to make the best use of that? If I go back to the road I live on with Hills Road, we now have an effort to try and create a sedum area, and we've got responses to residents trying to remould the end of the floating bus stops into landscaped areas. So I just think if you experiment, sometimes we've got, it's not simple, and I'm not trying to make the life of the project manager that much more complicated, but we do end up with a range of interesting spaces where you want to try and create some sense of place or some value, and they're all different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Sargent.
Sorry.
You better sit in the front row.
All right. Just quick. I mean, I think one of the big issues around the Elizabeth Way Highworth Avenue roundabout is people like it at the moment, yeah, and we do need really good design in whatever comes forward to get the support of the residents, yeah. We've got to sell a lot of these things, and good design will be a big aspect of that, and I very much welcome the idea of putting better design into some of these things, and, you know, as the person before said, you know, we need some landmarking as well. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't got an unlimited budget, but we can make an impact with some of the spaces, including because sometimes doing X doesn't cost any more than doing Y. So, are we happy with the revised Assembly recommendations? That we see a lot of good in this document. It gives us quite a lot of base for a lot of what we're doing, but that we continue the work. Is that it?
What do we mean by improvement and within what resource?
Well, I made a suggestion that each member of the board and the Assembly be asked, well, what elements do they think are missing, and that will then shape that. So we undertake some further work, and if there are inputs from other people who are here, that's taken into account as well. But it's not this. As has been said to me, this project could outlast the city deal, because we can continue to evolve design and get new ideas. And to some extent, it should be an evolution. But I think what we should really be aiming for is an update by, I say, the autumn, rather than keeping this going for a long time. And if we are then commissioning some people to do some work, we just want to have a one-off brief to effectively make a good job of trying to improve it. But it's not an ongoing project beyond improving it this time. Okay? So on the basis of that route of getting input from the Assembly and Board and aiming for one improvement, can I see those in favour of the recommendations as they came from the Assembly? Thank you.